G'day IB Psychologist. You know me by now. I'm always looking for ways to help students write better essays. And I think planning is really important. So I came up with this idea to help my students plan better essays that were going to show they could answer the question, use studies effectively, and show critical thinking, and have a nice logical structure. It was pretty basic, but I think the students really liked it. Because it was effective and their essays were fantastic. I can honestly say when I read the class set of essays, they were the best standard I've ever read. So let me show you now what that idea was. Alright, first of all, what I did was I printed out a page like this, right? This is, can you see that? This is on colored card, alright? And then the students would cut these out, and I'll show you this in a moment. And then I gave them this page here, right? And so let me show you how it worked. So you see, what I have on this page here are all of the individual pieces that I would expect to go in an essay. Introduction, 3 studies, 1 or 2 key points, a key term to define, 3 buts, and a conclusion. So if you followed my other essay advice, I typically put it, well, in a similar order to that, right? You write the introduction, central argument, studies, counter-arguments, conclusion. But that formulaic structure, it's fine, it works okay, but if you really want to score top marks, if you want to write a fantastic essay, you've got to be a little bit more flexible. So I designed this idea here where I've got, the students would get that piece of card, right, and I find when I print things on card, they just are a bit more effective. And then I had this planning page here. Now, of course, you're always going to begin with the introduction. Sorry, my handheld camera skills here aren't the greatest. All right, so I naturally knew that students are going to begin with the introduction. And then, well, what are you going to begin with? Well, so it would depend on the question. So I would get students to write the question in the top there, okay? And then the introduction has 3 parts. Restate the question, state the study, state the counter-argument. Now you're going to write that last, right? After you do the rest of it. So what might they begin with? Okay, what's my point number 1? All right, they're going to start with their first point, and then they might think, you know what, I'm going to use my first study here because I've made my point, and in this side they write down what the point is. All right, and then they put, okay, I'm going to use my first study here, and then I'm going to write down what the study is. And they go, okay, actually it's pretty logical now for me to put my second study. I'm going to put my second study and write what the study is. But you know what, this study has a limitation, so actually here I'm going to add a but. I'm going to say, you know what, that was a correlational study. And so, but that was a correlational study. Can we deduce causation? And then I'm going to introduce my third study here, which is going to say, well, actually this one here is a true experiment. But you know what? And then they might say, hey, you know what, actually I'm not going to define any key terms. You could leave it out. You don't have to put this all in here. And I've got a blank card here in case they want to add something. You know, I'm going to add a point here. Or they might think, you know what, I'm going to make a second point. So they would add a second point. I'm going to make another point here. So let's take an example here, okay? I'm working a lot on stress for IB health psychology. So let's say the question is, just evaluate one explanation of one health problem, right? So I'll write the question in the top here. Now, you might not be able to see this, you probably can't, but trust me, it says evaluate one explanation of one health problem. All right, now so I know that I'm going to begin with my introduction. However, I don't actually know what my thesis is yet, right? What my explanation is, what my studies are, my counter-arguments, and that's the whole part of the planning process. So I'm going to leave this blank, I'm going to do it at the end. Okay, so one explanation, now I'm going to go through my mind, I'm going to think, okay, this gives me the choice of explanations to choose from. I'm going to go with social status. I really like this as an explanation. I've been studying it a lot. I know a lot about it. Okay, so my key term to define, right, my one explanation is going to be subjective social status and how this can explain high levels of stress. So my key term here, I'm going to write subjective social status. And again, you probably want to do this in pencil so you can change it later. Now, my first key point is just simply that subjective social status is linked with high stress. That leads me into my first study to support that, right, which is Steen et al.'s, so I can write that here. They did this with subjective social status in teenagers. So now I know I've got my key term, my point of my study. I'm on track, I'm answering the question. Then I can say, but. Now here is where the value of this scaffold becomes really useful, because if you can use your critical thinking to help connect ideas, that's going to take your essay to the next level. So I can say, but this shows us the how, but it doesn't tell us why. So I can say this explanation here is pretty limited. It doesn't give us a reason. It just simply shows that there is a correlation between status and stress, but there's no reason why. Now that leads me nicely into my second point. The why could be because subjective social status is linked with our biology. That brings me to my next study, which is Rahal et al. Study, which shows exactly that. A correlation between having low subjective status and a higher physiological stress response in the TRIA social stress test. Now you can see here, the beauty of this is I can see I've got some leftover points here. I've still got 2 buts and maybe another study. So I'm thinking, all right, I probably need to show some more critical thinking here. I'm actually, off the top of my head here, racking my brain, what's a but here? I can say, all right, my but is maybe it's other factors. So evaluate one explanation of one health problem. Okay, I can say that it's subjective social status. I've got 2 studies that directly are related to subjective social status. But what about other social factors? Now maybe subjective social status, or social status in general, is linked to something called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And that's another factor that can lead to health problems. That's my but. And now I can introduce another study, which is going to link ACEs with subjective social status. And then I can say, but, right, maybe I can end here with another but, which is, yep, the explanation here is showing that it's socio-cultural factors like social status, okay, but we can see it's actually the biopsychosocial model, all right, and then I have my conclusion. Now, if you gave the same question to a whole class full of students, you would see, hopefully, 3 studies, 1 or 2 key points, a couple of bits of critical thinking, but they could all be different and they could all happen in a different order. And that's why I love this scaffold, because it's going to make sure that students have the right ingredients for a great essay, but they have the flexibility to mix them and arrange them as they see fit. Now, if you're a student as well, you can use this framework for multiple different exam questions. Now, what you might be thinking is, okay, but I can't use this in the exam, so why is it helpful? Well, that's exactly what a scaffold is, right? It's just training wheels. You do this enough and practice this enough with this, then by exam time, you don't need this because you know, oh, I need to add a couple of buts. Oh, I need to have a study. And you get so good at planning an essay that in the 5 minutes of your reading time and the first 5 minutes of the exam, you can do a plan like this with just this few amount of details, and then you're good to go. I really like essay plans for students as a way to prepare for exams and also as a teacher, because it means that I can give really specific targeted feedback without having to read whole essays. Students, you can write and figure out, are you on the right track to write a great essay without having to write the whole essay, all right? I was elected to lead, not elected to read, to quote the guy off The Simpsons. All right, so I promise when my students submitted their essays, I was blown away. They were fantastic, and they were so nice to read because the critical thinking was embedded into the structure of the essay, not just added to the end as an afterthought, but it made sure that they were showing a range of critical thinking points. They did have enough studies. They were trying to actually make points and arguments in the essay and not just summarizing studies. If I can find this resource, I will put a link in the description so you can download it and print it. And teachers, you can adapt this, improve it, however you like. If this is helpful, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. All right, cheers. Again, this was one of the best things I added into my class next year, so I really hope it's helpful for you too.